I met a Dutchman whilst I was travelling as a backpacker in India. He was riding a Royal Enfield Bullet 500cc. He said, "Why don't you buy one like mine and we'll travel together?" I'm always open for adventure and fun, and so I said yes. I went to Chennai and I bought my own Bullet 500. Broke my leg in Pakistan. I was helped by a family of comedy actors in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, and they looked after me for months whilst my leg was healing. And I taught English in an English language institute, which was great fun. I've had hundreds of punctures. I've seen wildlife, I've seen elephants, I've seen turtles on beaches, I've seen festivals in India and Malaysia. I've seen so many changes. I've been to the coast, I've been to mountains, in Karakorums and down to Goa in the sea. I've seen rivers, beautiful beaches, and just wonderful everywhere I've been, but overwhelmingly, it's the people I've met.
A bullet in the wind. 7 years, no target. Do you remember the classic? Hema Malini, Rajesh Khanna on a bullet? Well, that could be Jacqui Furneaux' theme song. A ride that went on for 3 years short of a decade. That's right, 7 long years. At 50, she wasn't dreaming of a world tour. But one backpacking trip, one Dutch biker, and one impulsive Enfield purchase later, there was literally no looking back for her. She sailed to Australia with her bullet, been nursed back to health in Pakistan, and had Jawans in Kashmir fix her bike for her. From Colombian army searches to sleeping under the Aussie stars, she's even ridden through the birthplace of civilization, Syria. Now 74 and still riding that same Enfield bullet. She's documented all in the book Hit the Road Jack. I caught up with her in Goa for an exclusive chat. Watch till the very end. So hi Jacqui, welcome to Pathfinders of Generation Speed, and I believe you've spent 7 years riding around the world on a motorcycle, which was totally unplanned, right? And you did it on a Royal Enfield, and it was something that you not planned, you just set off, right? So could you tell me a little bit of how it came about, your adventures along the way, and any unique experiences you had, and the stuff that you spoke about how things just fall into place and stuff like that.
Right, yes, you're absolutely right. I had no experience of overland travel at all until I met a Dutchman whilst I was travelling as a backpacker in India. He was riding a Royal Enfield Bullet 500cc, and to cut a long story short, he said, "Why don't you buy one like mine and we'll travel together?" And I thought this was a wonderful offer, and I'm always open for adventure and fun, and so I said yes. So eventually I went to Chennai and I bought my own Bullet 500, which I still have 24 years later, and I ended up traveling for 7 years with the machine, but not with the Dutchman.
But when you bought the motorcycle, did you already know how to ride a motorcycle?
I already knew how to ride a motorcycle, yes.
And how did you get used to the flip, the gear shift being on the right hand side? Did that take getting used to?
It took some getting used to start with, and I was launched straight into the heavy traffic in Chennai, and so I was trying to cope with the traffic and trying to remember which side the brake was and how to change gear with the other foot. So it did take a while, but I got to hang of it after a while.
Okay, so could you give us a little run through of the route over the 7 years that you traveled?
Okay, well, I spent a long time in India, went right up as far as Sikkim, which I loved, and then into Nepal, and then back into India, into Pakistan, back into India, and then I shipped my motorcycle from India to Thailand and explored Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, Indonesia, and then I got on a boat, and I was going to go to Australia, but that was a disastrous voyage, so I ended up getting off and riding the rest of the way through Indonesia. And then I got on a barge in East Timor over to Australia, and then to New Zealand by plane, and then to Ecuador, and up through South America and Central America. I got as far as the United States and Canada, and then I flew myself and the bike home, almost 7 years to the day since I bought my beloved motorcycle.
Does your motorcycle have a name?
I'm ashamed to say it's called Bike.
Bike.
Which isn't very original, is it?
All right. So, give me about 5 experiences that you had that are typical to the unforeseen stuff that happens when you're out, or not the adventures that one can expect to have when you're out on your own motorcycling, good or bad.
Well, I've had some unfortunate experiences that I thought would be awful, but I broke my leg in Pakistan. But even that turned out to be interesting because I was helped by a family of comedy actors in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, and they looked after me for months whilst my leg was healing. And I taught English in an English language institute, which was great fun, and I enjoyed that experience. On the whole, I found people immensely kind and generous, and I would urge anyone, if you've got a penchant for going travelling, do give it a try. Don't be afraid of people. People are very helpful and will be generous along the way. Other incidents I've had have been voyages on small yachts, which have left me feeling very scared of the sea. I haven't enjoyed those very much, but I survived. I've had hundreds of punctures, but there's always been somebody to help when something has gone wrong. The Enfield hasn't broken down as much as I thought it might. It keeps going if it possibly can. I've seen wildlife, I've seen elephants, I've seen turtles on beaches, I've seen festivals in India and Malaysia. I've seen so many changes. I've been to the coast, I've been to the mountains in Karakorums and down to Goa in the sea. I've seen rivers, beautiful beaches, and just wonderful everywhere I've been. But overwhelmingly, it's the people I've met that the memory stays with me.
And you were talking about the woman whom you met in Thailand, who challenged you to a game of Scrabble. Could you tell me that incident?
Yes. I just went in to buy a postcard into her little shop, and she asked me if I was English, and I said yes. And she said, "Do you play Scrabble?" And I said yes. And she said, "Well, would you like a game?" I said yes. So she shut the shop and she took me into the back room and got out the Scrabble board. And I thought, well, I mustn't be too, mustn't choose long words. I'll choose short words because it's my first language and not hers. And so I was I didn't try very hard, and she beat me. And so she said, "Oh well, would you have another game with me?" So I thought, oh, all right then, I'll show you what I can do with my mother tongue and my English exams that I've passed. So we settled down to have another game, and I tried really hard, and she still beat me. And then she showed me a book where she kept all the scores of all the foreigners that she played Scrabble with, and the only person who'd ever beaten her was a German.
No English person?
No English person had beaten her at all, which I found was quite funny. So I left the shop with a postcard and my tail between my legs.
And you were also talking about how you were riding through Australia and you wanted a place to sleep and you were tired and you came across this road train. What was that incident?
Well, in Australia, where I was travelling, there's tracks rather than roads, at least there were when I was travelling there. And if you saw a cloud of dust in the distance, you know to get off the road quickly because it's a big road train and they are massive. And they go from north to south carrying goods. And so I saw one coming and I got off the road and I thought, oh, I'd love to have a look in one. Anyway, it wasn't very likely, but one night I was trying to find somewhere to sleep. And I was used to just sleeping at the side of the road. I'd find some trees and camp under there, under the stars, which was lovely. And this had been going on for about a week, 2 weeks, and I wanted to speak to a woman. I like to just sometimes talk about sewing and embroidery, and I thought there's no chance, because most of the people I spoke to were at filling stations and they were men. And anyway, I thought, well, maybe I'll find somewhere. And so I saw some white buildings in the back, in the distance, and then I approached the buildings, and I was so fed up with my own company, and I was really looking forward to a proper meal. I'd been eating tin sardines for days, and I thought, oh, I'd love somewhere nice to sleep instead of just on the ground. And I challenged the universe. I said, come on then. And that night, I approached the porter cabins, as they turned out, and as I approached, the woman opened the door. She said, oh, how lovely, another woman. Can you stay? They're having fun. I've got a roast dinner on, and would you like to stay? And you can sleep in one of the road trains, which was one of my dreams to do that. So all three things came true, and I did have to think, well, that's funny, the universe was listening to me.
We're talking about how they almost dropped your bike into the sea while loading it onto a barge.
Oh, they didn't almost drop it into the sea, but the captain of the ship, the second small yacht I was sailing on, we met a storm, and his anchor wasn't strong enough, and he threatened to use my motorcycle as an anchor. And I said, oh no, you're not.
And so, then how did that, I mean, what did you do then?
Well, I helped him take control. He completely lost his head. And
where was this, sorry?
This was going from Colombia to Panama. And there's a strip of land called the Darien Gap.
I know the Darien Gap, yes.
It's more or less impassable. So you can either fly from Bogota to Panama City, or you can get on a small sailing craft. And I chose the latter.
And you put your bike on the sailing craft?
My bike went on the boat as well, and it was an Italian skipper, and he had a very fiery temper. And I don't think he was a very good sailor, because he didn't have an adequate anchor. When we parked up somewhere and the storm blew up and the boat was not gripping, the anchor wasn't holding the boat. So he said, I know, I'll throw your bike overboard and we'll use that as an anchor. And I said, oh no, you're not. So I didn't let him, but we were all right.
You did this trip in 2000 and?
Between 2000 and 2007.
Okay, right. So obviously at that time there was no Google Pay, no Google Maps.
No.
You had to use paper maps.
Yes.
So how did you manage money and how do you find your way? Navigation and money.
Well, I use maps. One of my friends gave me a tiny little atlas, so I knew which country came next, and I was able to navigate my way around the world with that. And I would buy paper maps whenever I could. No, there was no internet. Well, there was internet, but I didn't have access to it. There was no smartphones. And I would ask people. And I navigated with the sun sometimes, because I knew I was going east. So I knew where the sun would be. I've done that quite a few times. And I'd just look at the map and I'd see somewhere with an interesting name and I'd go there. But I had a lot of time. I didn't have any time restrictions. And money, I stopped to earn some money along the way. I became a hospice nurse in New Zealand for a while. And I helped somebody with his accounts in Australia.
Okay. And right, that's good. Coming to India, okay. What have been your most heartwarming experiences in India, being a white woman riding on a Royal Enfield Bullet, which is basically a very male-dominated space, you know? I mean,
yes, you're right.
Even now, you'd see women riding. They'll ride smaller bikes. You do see women riding bullets, but at that time in the 2000s, it was a very rare sight for a woman to be riding a 500cc bullet motorcycle. So what were the reactions to seeing this white woman riding a bullet 500cc in India?
Well, yes, that's a good point. It was quite unusual. I did see other women riders, but they were mostly riding scooters, and I was quite a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. But everybody was very kind, and it was pre-internet days mostly, and people weren't familiar with people travelling from A to B. So I did cause a bit of a stir in some places.
Right. And I believe you've written a book called Hit the Road, Jacques.
Yes.
Right? And how did that come about? Were you riding to write a book? Or was it in your mind that I'm going to write a book about this? Or once you came back, you realized that you got such fantastic experiences which you never expected to have, and this would make great content for a book, so you wrote a book. What were the steps in the process? How did the book come to be? Basically, that's what I'm asking you.
I know, that's a very, very good question. I know a lot of people who go on a journey in order to write a book. But when I did this trip, I didn't think anyone would be interested at all in what I'd done. And I tried telling friends and family, and their eyes would glaze over. And, oh, here she goes again, telling another story, how boring. And I thought, oh, all right then. And I kept quiet about it for ages. And then somebody said, oh, you did what? And said, well, you ought to write a magazine article. So I wrote one magazine article, and that led on to more magazine articles. And then people asked me to start doing talks. And then eventually so many people said, you really should write a book. I thought, really? Are people that interested? And so 7 years after I got back, I started to write my book. And it took me 3 years to write it. So about 10 years after I came back, the book was written.
You know, Jackie, this is so, it's uncannily similar to my conversation with Elspeth.
Exactly.
It was the same thing with her. Like she was telling me, when she would tell people, their eyes would glaze over. The same thing.
Exactly.
The exact same thing she would tell me, that their eyes would glaze over and no one would be interested. It is only then, one day someone said that, oh, why don't you write a book? And that's how she got about
Yes.
the same thing she told me.
Yes.
I mean, you know, it's phenomenal that you all have done these things, but people just I mean, they don't know the magnitude of it, you know.
It was a huge thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely huge. But yes, Elspeth was the same. She tried to tell people and ignored her. And in fact, some of them were quite rude to her.
When she was starting off,
yes,
Bike magazine,
yes,
that whole letter is printed in a book.
I know, it's quite mad, isn't it, when you think about it?
It's very chauvinistic. Very,
exactly.
It stinks of matriarchy.
Yeah.
Patriarchy.
Yeah, you're right. But we've overcome that.
Yeah.
And now we're telling our stories.
Yeah.
And people are interested.
Yeah.
Once you start it. And we've both inspired, I hope, other women to ride and write.
Yes. Good. Thank you very much. That's been splendid.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you. That
Thanks a
was
lot.
lovely.
Yeah.